but you know.
I wonder what the proportion, this is a sort of a random question, but I wonder what the proportion of the American public actually could define collateral damage automatically, right? I mean,
yeah, I don't know. That'd be an interesting study.
An interesting question, but
yeah.
I guess I could go ahead and move to you, David, if you would want to tell us a little bit about your experience in the military, and maybe if that relates to the current wars, and any insight you may have.
Well, first, thanks for inviting me here. I consider myself more of a man on the street, or just, you know, Main Street America, than I do a military expert or foreign policy. I'm just what, you know, I have studied a little bit, but most of what I've got is from the newspaper, magazines, or television. But I have been through some training in the military, the U.S. Army Command and General Staff College, and some other courses where, you know, you get a lot of theory. My actual practical experience started with training and preparation for Vietnam. And I was over there with the 4th Infantry Division in 1969.
And were you a volunteer? Or
well, I did. I actually volunteered as my dad advised me to go into the Air Force when I was a senior in high school. And my dad put 20 years in the Army and gave me great advice going to the Air Force. So as a high school senior, I was ready to take Dad's advice. And graduated in '67 and was ready to hit the ground running in June of '67. At that point in time, the Air Force wasn't taking me in because I guess they had enough, so many college graduates and people that were trying to get out of the draft. They didn't need an 18-year-old right out of high school.
I heard a lot of people join the National Guard to try to...
Yeah, so, you know, the Air Force was popular in '67, and so I decided to go to seminary, and I became a licensed Baptist preacher, and I went to college for a year and enjoyed my freshman year in college. And then the next year, my brother graduated from high school at 17, and he and I both wanted to continue our education, and we really couldn't afford to go to the school full time that we wanted to. We knew we needed to grow up. He was 17, so we decided to go in the U.S. Army together. Why would we do that? Well, I had a dad and a history of relatives that were patriots. And if it was good enough for Dad, it's good enough for, well, is my brother and I, was maybe kind of a little macho type thing, you know. If you can do it, I can do it. But we weren't drunk when we did enlist and swear in. So we knew what we were doing. We went through basic training together at Fort Polk. It was great. He ended up going into supply and going over to Vietnam, and I stayed in the States going through some more training for personnel management and administration. But I was also told I would not be going to Vietnam because I had a brother in country, and at that time they had the policy where one family member at a time. And so I was ready to go to Germany, Hawaii, Korea, anywhere but Nam. Ended up going to Vietnam because the U.S. Army made a bureaucratic mistake. So my brother and I, he was in the 4th Infantry Division. I was in the 4th Infantry Division in Vietnam. We ended up in the same unit. We went on some of the same convoys, same patrols, some of the same missions over there. So I saw Vietnam with the 4th Infantry Division, and even though I was in personnel administration, they detailed me to an artillery battalion where I actually went out with the artillery and the infantry and pretty much did whatever they wanted me to do. You know, we didn't sit around like you watch MASH on TV with radar sitting in the base camp. Well, we were getting out in the jungle. We were getting out into fire bases. We were going on patrols and convoys, moving the artillery around from one mountaintop or one base camp or small fire base to the other. So in Vietnam, one person might have several jobs, several duties, and the front was all over. So that is perhaps some similarity with some of the Mid-Eastern problems.
I thought an interesting point you brought up was that you and your brother joined because of patriotism. And I don't know if either one of you might want to both comment on this, but in terms of, you were in the military and then you got out and came to the realization that arguably some of the Middle Eastern actions, especially in Iraq, these are arguably unjust wars, or wars maybe that the United States, some of the political leaders in America are waging for reasons that aren't necessarily in the interest of the public or in the interest of America in general. And so the question becomes, what does a patriotic citizen do that is either involved in the military or something? I mean, because you're engaging in sort of this political activism to sort of protest the war that you see as unjust. I mean, so how does that work into it? I mean, in terms of should a patriotic what does patriotism mean for a soldier? I mean, in terms of a war being just or unjust.
What's interesting is Dad actually swore me into the Army. But I think it was right before 9/11, wasn't it, Dad?
Yes.
And right before 9/11.
That summer.
And then, the summer before 9/11, he swore me into the Army. And I was going to become a linguist in the Army.
So you switched to...
And 9/11 happened, and then Dad kind of talked to me. And my mom actually talked to my dad and was kind of like, let's think this over. And so Dad actually talked to me for probably one of the first times I've ever heard, saying that, this is probably a bad idea and you don't want to do this G.I. Joe crap.
Was this when we...
He was pretty emotional at that point.
And this is when we were invading Afghanistan or before Iraq? Was this when we were ramping up to Iraq?
This was about the time that George Bush said, we're going to go over there and they're going to hear us.
Like he was getting belligerent kind of.
With that hard hat on. And
it
was around that point when we were...
Well, the whole country, the whole world was rallying behind the U.S. and George Bush even, and he kind of, I think, squandered that kind of goodwill that the world was supporting America because, they knew that what bin Laden did was bad and everyone was rallying around us. And then it made sense to go after bin Laden, but then the Iraq sort of thing happened. And
we hit a high point of patriotism, I think, right after 9/11.
Right, absolutely,
the crisis, you kind of come together, the colony starts working together.
And you assume the president's going to do what's best.
I mean. But anyways, Dad swore me in. And then after 9/11 happened, Dad told me what his dad told him, that he should go Air Force. And, so then we went up to MEPS probably a week after that, or, the next day or whatever, and he got me out of there. And I think about that, and that was really a big change of course that I'm glad happened.
To switch, okay.
Because had it not, I would have almost surely gone to Iraq or Afghanistan, one of the two, if not both.
More boots on the ground than surveillance flying around.
Well,
It's interesting. I don't know. It's kind of a sort of... Well, I guess we should finish the subject of patriotism first, though. I mean, so what is kind of your view in terms of that? I mean, is it a duty of a patriotic citizen or soldier to support a country's war no matter what, or should they only support a just war? I mean, arguably the Iraq war is unjust, and I mean, to me personally, I see patriotism as supporting your country when it's doing the right thing. But I mean, one of our founding fathers said dissent is the highest form of patriotism. So, I mean,
I mean, if you have a realization that there's some kind of public knowledge going around, or public opinion that's going around that's not entirely accurate. As a patriotic person, I feel like it's my duty to go ahead and spread that around,
right,
and shed some light on that.